Johnathan A. Hill is a renowned antiquarian bookseller located in New York, New York. Welcome to the Bibliophile.
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be with you today.
You're renowned for your catalogs.
Yes, I like to make catalogs. It's a good record of my activities over the years. And it's a shame that so many dealers have given up on catalogs and have just resorted to internet lists because those aren't being saved, not yet, by any institution. So a lot of these dealers will never be remembered.
So that's one of the key reasons that you're doing this?
Well, no, I enjoy the objects. You know, we have Jerry Kelly, this very famous designer, and before Jerry, we had Abe Lerner, another well-known designer, design our catalogs, and so they look nice. And they're very pleasant objects, and people like them. And they're people who don't read our PDFs that we put online, but they will read a printed catalog. People keep them, and sometimes we'll get orders from printed catalogs 3 years after the catalog was mailed out, which is kind of a miracle.
They stick around.
Yeah, they do. You know, and then some of our catalogs are kind of heavy. People can use them as door stops or whatever.
Well, they really are. And thank you so much for sending me the selection that you did. They're works of art.
Well, that's Jerry. That's not me. Don't forget that. I have an artist working for us and helping us, and that's his work, not ours. But now that we're dealing in these Japanese materials, which tend to be extremely beautiful, you know, this is my wife's activity and expertise being reflected in those catalogs. That's also made our catalogs much more beautiful. Science books tend to be very black and white, but Japanese books, Asian books tend to be very colorful. So that's a nice thing that we're doing. And Jerry's having a lot of fun laying out those catalogs because they're just prettier.
Okay, so why are bookseller catalogs, we've touched on it a little bit, but why are they important?
Well, all catalogs of books and manuscripts are important, whether they're private library catalogs or institutional catalogs or auction catalogs or bookseller catalogs, because it shows how books were valued, how books were moved around and appreciated over the centuries.
And I guess, as you say, they tell you what the prices of books were at certain periods throughout history, which you can get that on the internet, though, can't you?
Some, but sometimes a lot of these things are not on the web yet. They haven't been, they're still not digitized at all. That'll be one of the last things that gets digitized. It's not high on the list of libraries to digitize, or even catalog, booksellers catalogs, for example, or auction catalogs. They just don't do it because there's so many of them, and there are other what they consider more important things to catalog, and perhaps they are more important. I don't know. So a lot of this stuff is unrecorded or unstudied. That's for sure.
So why is it important to know the value of books over the years then?
Well, it shows what kind of importance people placed on these books. Certain books come in and out of fashion, or, if you think about books on numismatics or engraved gems in the 17th, 16th, 17th, and 18th century, these are extremely important subjects. And now these books and the books about them brought very high prices, and they're really beautiful books. Now people don't really collect this. It's not considered a popular subject to collect. And so the prices have gone down as a result. And so you can see how people value books, whether they're up or down.
And of course, valuing books and the subjects that they cover reflect the values that society places on all sorts of different things.
Absolutely. That's a very good point. Absolutely. You're right.
One of the interesting things about your practice is that you seem to specialize in catalogs from the 17th, 18th, 19th century, French particularly. that correct?
Yes, yes, exactly. Right from the very beginning, even when I was serving my apprenticeship before I went on my own in 1978, I collected bibliography, association copies of bibliography. I didn't have any money and I wanted to collect something. So this seemed interesting and cheap. So I began to collect it. And then when I went into business, my first catalog consists of my now former collection of association copies of bibliography. And I realized it sold. And so I continued to deal in that and specialize in it. I'm one of the, number of dealers who specialize in it. I probably specialize in it more than anybody else. And, the history of book collecting, the history of libraries, the history of auctions, how books move around, how books get looted and surface again. And there are lots of catalogs and the big literature about this. And that's one of the things that we've done very nicely over the years and created a number of customers, clients who came in, got interested and continue with me for, almost 50 years now.
It seems to me that association copies of bibliographies, man, that's specialized.
Well, yeah, sure, but there are plenty of people. Yeah, but when I started, it was just after the A&L Munby and John Carter sale. So there's all this great stuff out there, presentation copies to Munby and Carter or vice versa.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of fascinating stuff. I really got interested in the 20th century world of bibliography first. And then I started, as I learned more, I started moving back and realizing there was many more centuries earlier of book collecting to get to know.
I was fascinated to learn from your ABAA video that you were involved in selling books to Bob Fleck very early on.
Yeah, he was my first customer.
Yeah.
In a funny way, yes. Quickly, I was working for Seven Gables Bookshop. Mr. Cohn, one of the owners of Seven Gables, this was a summer job I had in 1973. He said, you want a customer? Here, answer this letter. And it was a letter from Bob Fleck, who was at that time a chemical engineer. And he was a collector of A. Edward Newton. So I had prepared a list of all the A. Edward Newton books that Seven Gables had and sent it to him. And he bought a couple. So Bob, yes, really was my first customer. And then became a good friend when he entered the trade. We did a lot of business and had happy times. And I had real high regard for him as a bookseller and as a person.
I was so happy to have been able to interview him before he died.
Yeah, good guy. Big loss. My son's doing fine, but Bob was a good guy.
Yeah, I know. I drove down there with a truck once from Canada to buy stuff.
Oh yeah, well yeah, one could buy a truckload from Bob just as easily as one book. Yeah, he was a good bookseller. Got a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Okay, so let's have a look at when you buy bookseller catalogs. What do you look for?
Well, I'm mostly interested nowadays in the early stuff and the really rare ones. Catalogs prepared for the Frankfurt Book Fair in the 16th century. Those are the kinds of things, the really early ones, the 17th century, 18th century stuff. And I look for rarity and importance. And a lot of times you have to read the catalog to see what's in it, whether it's just a list of used books, 17th or 18th century used books, or whether the dealer was an actual antiquarian rare bookseller focusing on rare books. Now, the idea of rare books really only got going in the mid 18th century. Before, it was people collected useful books and useful editions. They didn't care about the first edition. They wanted the best edition or the edition that they could get their hands on. But then it changed and people began to collect books as rarities.
Who brought that in?
A man in France named Dubuer, the great bookseller. He really started thinking about books as rarities and what was rare and important at the same time, but what was the first.
Yeah. And I guess, again, the familiar reason given is that this was the introduction of a great idea, for example, how it was introduced to the world.
Yeah, well, he wrote a standard book on bibliography and listing rare books, as well as useful books or the best edition, listing the best editions. But it was sort of a guide to rare books. And then that idea spread into Germany, and there are a whole number of books in Germany about what's a rare book,
Right.
and with lists of them. And it became how people today collect books.
Yeah, what I'm getting at, though, is he must have come up with some kind of rationale for why this was important.
Well, I think he figured that the book, it was another way of looking at it, which would make it valuable.
Right.
Depreciate it in a different light. And that's one of the roles good booksellers have, is to see something in it that no one else ever saw and bring out a quality in it.
Yeah. So as much as anything, it was supply and demand.
Yes, that's for sure. Yeah. But of course, in the 18th century, there was plenty of supply. I mean, they were drowning in books, these people.
Okay, so you look for rarity and you look for the type of books that are listed. What else do you look for when you're buying a bookseller catalog?
Oh, well, series of them. If I can find a bunch of them by one bookseller, that's quite interesting to me, because then you have a little collection. And it's really rarity. There's some very common ones, and I've had them enough, or no, I don't want it because everyone has it, or it's too common. But
Right.
then there are other ones that I'm desperate to get. So don't ask me which ones they are. I'm not telling. I have a mental list, though.
Yeah. Okay. So you're desperate to get these unnamed catalogs. Why?
Well, I'm a bookseller because I can sell them.
Okay, they're desirable because of rarity and what
Yes,
else?
and one of those books I mentioned to you, the Pollard and Ehrman distribution of books by catalog, which is a Roxborough Club book and kind of rare. This is a wonderful guide to this sort of literature of how books were distributed and what records there were of books being distributed, auctions, bookseller catalogs, lots of different ways.
So there's a variety of different kinds of catalog. First of all, there's kind of a general offering from a bookseller, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can you expand on that a bit?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, there are kinds of catalogs. Certainly, there are ones, general catalogs of just what's in stock, but also very specific. You can get down to very specific author or subject. I mean, incredibly narrow areas. I've done a couple of those kinds of catalogs over the years. Once I did one on the 16th century physician and troublemaker Paracelsus, and then I've done a series of 5 catalogs of catalogs, bookseller, library, auction catalogs.
I've got to get those.
They're hard to get.
So these catalogs of yours, these catalogs of catalogs, what, they're rare? I guess they're rare.
Well, I had a bunch, I mean, like 20 or 30 of them, of the 5 catalogs bound up, and they got sold out right away because I did an index at the end of the 5th one, so you can find your way around it. I've worked hard to make pretty good descriptions so people know what's in these things. So
yeah.
I mean, they seem to, but the great model was the catalog of Bernard Breslauer, the great English bookseller, who did it. I think it's catalog 52. He did a catalog of catalogs, and that was I was modeling myself after him, and he was really deeply involved, and they had one important collection which he was sold after his death at Christie's of bibliography. And
there's a Christie catalog of his collection?
Yes. The sale was 2005, and 3-part catalog. Wonderful books.
I'll put that on my list as well then.
Yeah, you should get those.
Okay. So there's also the sale of someone's library.
Sure. sometimes you buy a collection from a private collector and you make a catalog of it. A number of my catalogs have reflected collections that I bought. I think it's catalog 210 or 211. I had bought a collection of mathematics books, and I'd sold many of the books to this collector. And one day he called up and said, "I'm not doing that anymore. You want to buy them back?" And so I bought them back and made a catalog. And it was a pretty nice catalog. He was a good, careful, intelligent collector, and I was very happy to get these books back.
And then there's a catalog that you, the bookseller, have worked on with the collector who wants to sell his collection. Is that accurate? I mean, are there some like that?
Well, that can happen, but I don't know too many examples of it. I mean, I have helped collectors tidy up their collection, meaning gone in and made order and listed their books better than they had listed. And oftentimes, it's on 3x5 cards or with handwriting or no list at all, just to help them prepare for the day that they want to sell the books. Hopefully to me, but all too often they go somewhere else.
One of the great Canadian books of any kind is the Landy Bibliography.
Oh yeah, Lawrence Landy. That's a good one. Yeah.
He worked directly with a great Canadian book designer, Robert Reed. And it seems to me that as a condition of him donating his books to McGill, it was agreed that the two of them would produce this magnificent book.
That's a wonderful thing to do, to have a really good-looking catalog. First of all, it's not so simple, and it's valuing the collection and the generosity of this gift.
Exactly. So it's kind of a monument to philanthropy is one thing.
Well, those books deserve a nice presentation, that's for sure.
Yeah. And as I say, when you think about it, this is what, I mean, a collector who's spent half a lifetime pulling together some great books, this is their shot at immortality with a book.
Right.
A catalog. Yes?
Yes, exactly. Yes, and a number of collectors have made these beautifully printed catalogs. One that I was involved in was I had a client named Vern Roberts who collected books on. Well, he ended up having a catalog of his books. It was a book on mechanics, physics, materials, the nature of materials, and he was a great client for about 20 years. And he made a catalog called Bibliotheca Mechanica. I gave him the name of a friend named Tom Taylor, who was a book designer in Austin, Texas. Yeah. And Tom made a very handsome catalog of it. The presentation was nice. And I still have 200 or 300 copies of that Bibliotheca Mechanica in my warehouse.
Okay, listen up.
I can sell them cheap too.
Well, Taylor was a really good designer.
Yes, I mean, Tom's got a lot of interests. I mean, he still designs books, but he's spending most of his time writing books and then designing them himself. He was a great bookseller, and then he got interested in making the books, and then he wrote that book about Johnny Jenkins' text fake, revealing all the forgeries in Texas, which is a real classic of bibliographical discovery.
Okay, wait a sec, because I just bought a box full of catalogs a couple of weeks ago, just in preparation for this series that I'm doing on Bookseller.
Good.
And you're the inaugural guest.
Oh, well, thank you.
Anyway, I'm just looking at it right now. Is this the same John H. Jenkins?
Yeah, Johnny Jenkins, sure. In Austin, Texas, the great scoundrel bookseller.
He was shot in the back of the head.
Yes, they still don't know what happened. Some people say it was suicide. He was a known gambler. It might have been, related to gambling debts. I have no idea.
Are you saying then that my catalog, the one that I got here, or he put together many of them?
Yeah.
Are you saying this is all bullshit?
No, I'm not. But I do know that he marketed a number of Texas forgeries. And Tom was the first one to notice that famous rarities were suddenly appearing in quantities. And he got suspicious and began to actually look at them, and wrote a most wonderful book. I mean, it's like Carter and Pollard investigation of certain 19th century pamphlets in our century. It's real good detective work.
Who says antiquarian book dealing is boring?
Well, there we had Mark Hoffman, people getting blown up. In my career, I've worn a bulletproof vest and been wired and carried bags of money around for the customs agents. So things happen.
Wow. You've produced many beautiful catalogs.
Again, because I had good designers.
Yes.
My first 11 catalogs were designed by me. No, first 10 catalogs, and no one could call them beautiful. There was a sharp difference with catalog 11 when Abe Lerner made a template. And it's because of the designers.
Okay, so the question is, did bringing in the designers help increase your business?
Yeah, yes, because the catalogs, first of all, they're extremely legible. I mean, that's another thing you have to remember. Legibility really does make a big difference. And all too often today, when you do get catalogs, the design lacks something. They're not very inviting. I do feel that our catalogs invite you in right away.
Yeah. They have a beautiful sophistication about them.
Well, that's Jerry now, and was Abe before, making him look so beautiful and laid out so well.
And legible.
And legible, yeah. Now we're going through a big transition. We used to use printers in America, and
Yes.
then I said to Jerry, these are so expensive, and he
Yeah.
said, well, I have a printer in the Czech Republic. I can do it for half. And so we went to the Czech Republic to have these things printed. And then the Czech printer said, Jerry, you're too picky and difficult, so we don't want to work for you anymore. So now we're having our catalogs printed in China.
Yeah.
But the problem with China is, well, there's a tariff, of course, thanks to our current president. But also the delay, they're so big and heavy, the catalogs, that they get shipped by surface. So it's like a turnaround time is 6 months instead of 1.5 months, let's say.
Right.
So now we just made a catalog 234 that Yoshi, my son, is prepared, and that's being digitally printed. And the turnaround time is sort of like 2 days. It's just amazing. So, and for a fraction of the price. And the color, it's almost good. And Jerry said it's getting so much better that it will continue to get, the quality of the printing will get better and better. So
Jerry's overseeing it.
Oh yeah, Jerry is, not only is he a designer, he's a production manager.
Okay.
And, worries about everything. And it's great. He also knows what he's looking at. We're not as skilled as Jerry in noticing things.
So legibility and beauty, what else do you consider when you undertake a catalog?
Well, we try to make good descriptions. Full descriptions, and especially now that we're dealing in the Asian things, which we're concentrating on more and more. I feel like we have to tell stories about we have to explain what this is and why it exists much more fully than a Western book, because a lot of these names are unfamiliar, or a lot of these subjects are unfamiliar to our general clientele. Now, they're, of course, specialists who know infinitely more than we'll ever know, but we have to explain things to people, and that's where my wife's expertise comes in real handy. She tells me and I write it down.
Because she's got knowledge of the books themselves.
Well, yes. Luckily, and 35 years ago, when we were courting, I wasn't thinking about the fact that she had studied early Japanese literature in Tokyo.
Right.
I was thinking about other things. But she learned how to read all the old hands and knows lots of unusual things that many people don't know about Japanese culture and Chinese culture and Korean culture. She explains it very well to me, And so, once we started dealing in this stuff, after our kids didn't need us so much, that's about 20 years ago, it's been great adventure, great learning experience for me and for Megumi, and it's worked out real well. And so we have our inventory grows and grows, and we have good success with it. Touch wood, pretty good.
That's a lovely story of books bringing you two even closer together.
Well, yes. For years I traveled alone, and I didn't really enjoy that. Now we go, everywhere together, and it's nice. Made our relationship, much deeper and richer. And now our pillow talk is not about the children or anything. It's like, what are we going to do tomorrow in Paris? So,
yes. Yeah, that's wonderful. So we were talking about descriptions. So what you're doing is, in these descriptions, you're educating your readers.
After having been educated myself, learning about it, yes, that's exactly it.
What's fascinating about the Bookseller catalog, and by the way, if you hear that squeaking, it's my cat playing with her mouse, is they're a combination of education, scholarship, but sales as well. So how do you write them to involve all of this stuff?
I guess after 40 or 50,000 descriptions, which I've made over the years, I know how to tell a story kind of attractively. I'll put it that way.
Okay. So in other words, the way you sell them is by telling a terrific story about why you have to have this book.
Why you might want to consider having this book. And, one librarian told me once, every time I read one of your descriptions, I feel like I have to buy it, which was like the highest compliment I ever got from anybody about my profession, my activities.
So just in general, what constitutes a good description?
Well, it's got to be a narrative. It's got to bring out why this thing or book is kind of interesting to anybody. And of course, you got to price it right too. We price our books so we can sell them. We don't reach for the sky. We want to sell them so we can buy more books. And then we have we have a good professional photographer taking good pictures so people can see what they are as well.
Who's that?
A man named Robert Lawrence, and who's a New York photographer. He used to work at Sotheby's for many years, and I mean now for many years he's been on his own, helping us. So
who's your primary audience then?
Well, we have two main audiences, which is private collectors and libraries, museums. We sell plenty of books to the trade as well, but I don't seek that out in particular. I'm not that interested in selling to the trade. I've always worked with libraries, museums, and private collectors.
And how is the market right now? How are sales compared to, say, 5 years ago?
Oh, well, okay. Now, first of all, we're in this special time of COVID. It's, I will not say that business is great, but, it's not so bad.
Yeah.
But we are working very hard, and it's okay. But our sales are diminished, that's for sure. But not greatly diminished, but it's not so easy.
So have you seen a sort of a slow growth year over year since you started, or is it way up, way down?
Well, I mean, in my business, some years we'll sell X, and then other years we'll sell 2X. But it's only because I sold some book for, $2 million that makes the 2X. So, or more or less. But it's like that, if you hit it big, then you're doing great. Because I do have very valuable books, but we also have lots of books for, $1,000 and $5,000.
That's quite a valuable inventory.
Yeah, I'm looking around at it right now. It's in this room, yes,
But you only carry about 1,000 books, right?
I guess yes, in inventory, it's about 1,000 books,
Okay.
Range between 1,000 and 11 and 1,200.
How many catalogs do you produce, print?
Oh, well, less and less. I used to print 1,000 of them and mail them out. In the early days, American libraries, all sorts of libraries had money to buy rare books, and now that's curtailed or disappeared. So now we print, I think, 300, and we send out maybe 200, 220, and keep another 80 to send to people like you, or when we do the RBMS sessions and wherever they are, we bring a bunch of catalogs to distribute to librarians, or we bring them to the New York Book Fair to give away.
And how much does it cost to produce those 300?
A lot. When we were doing it in
like $10 each?
Oh, no, it's more like $50 a copy.
No.
Yeah. So or 50 or inside make catalogs that cost $100 a copy.
That's the cost to you.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
Well, exactly. And that's why, it's a miracle that we have continued to do it, but it is after, I think, salaries are our greatest expense. And we don't take that big salaries, but it's a big expense.
Wow.
So it's when Jerry sends us the bill, it's always with fear and trepidation that I open up the PDF.
Sorry, I shouldn't be laughing.
No, you shouldn't be laughing. But and that's why we left our printer in New Hampshire, who was great, because it was just too much. And then it got cut when we went to the Czech Republic, it was cut by half. And now it's about 2/3 of what the New Hampshire, now that we're in China, about 2/3. But now with the digital, it's gone down a whole lot. So we'll see how that works out.
Yeah, like how much?
Yoshi's catalog 234 is in the works, and it's not perfect. He's not entirely happy with the color work and some of the printing quality, but Jerry says over time it will get better and better and better.
And that's in the U.S.
Yes, I don't even know where it is, but it's somewhere local.
Okay. Can you tell me a bit about Jerry Kelly?
Well, I think you interviewed him, didn't you?
I interviewed him about typefaces and fonts and designers, but not about catalogs.
Oh, okay. Well, Jerry is first of all, it's a real joy to work with Jerry, because I just say to Jerry, make sure my name's spelled right and make it beautiful. And he does. But he always plays around with each catalog. It looks different, and he uses different typefaces, some of which he has created. And his ability to lay something out is so sophisticated. It's just fun to see what, we'll see. I'll say to him, have fun laying this one out. It's kind of complex. And then it comes back in 2 weeks. And it's just so clever how he resolved a number of the layout problems that I wouldn't have a clue how to deal with.
Well, this is the interesting thing. All of your catalogs are a uniform size.
Yes, right. Yeah.
But why'd you do that?
Oh, that's an accident. But yes, they're all 6x9 from the very beginning. It's just because that was the format that was chosen in the beginning, and I decided never to change it. And
why?
There's a famous story of a German auction house named Rice and Son. They used to have thick octavo catalogs, and they switched to a small folio or a large quarto format, and they got so much hate mail from people who've been on their list over the years saying, now I can't store them and stuff like that. So no, we'll stay with our format.
Well, what's interesting is I told you I got this box of catalogs, right? And I noticed from the Heritage Bookshop, they had everything you can imagine. They had the little stapled booklets. They had the glossy 4-page. They had from 0 to 100. They had A to Z. They had all sorts of different types of shapes and sizes and things that come diametrically opposed to what you're doing.
Well, yes, and I know. I mean, another example is Tom Taylor. When he was a bookseller, no catalog was the same. It was different formats, different. And I have all those catalogs, but they're a pain in the neck to put on the shelf and keep in order because they're always they're. It's messy.
Yeah.
Mine aren't messy.
No, they aren't. They're very.
They're all the same.
What did you grow up in the military or what?
No, I'm sure this is my mother's toilet training.
Okay.
Leave that one out, okay?
Yeah. Seriously? That's good. That's too good to leave out. Okay. Just winding down here.
Okay.
So whose catalogs do you admire the most?
Well, okay. Well, then we can talk about the past, because today there aren't that many beautiful catalogs being made. It's rather sad. But I've always loved the catalogs of Bernard Breslauer from the very beginning, when they're quite modest lists stapled, to his later fancy small folio catalogs. They're beautiful. The range of material is endless. He was the master of the enthusiastic run-on sentence. It's almost like he was breathless by the end of the first sentence of his description. And they reveal a certain enthusiasm, which I find very attractive. And whenever I need a little inspiration, I look at some of his catalogs just to see how he did it, because he was really good at a good description.
Yeah, so it's not so much, it's the appearance, but it's the wonderful descriptions that you go there for, right?
Yeah. And in fact, I've indexed a number of his catalogs over the years to look up things when I get a copy.
Okay, I picked up, as I say, in my little cache of catalogs I got a couple weeks ago. I got this.
Oh, Goodspeed, sure.
Yeah. Okay, and here's one of their descriptions. First edition, very rare. Wright, 1910, locates only one copy. We do not know who Richard Moody was otherwise, but his book is in the running for the worst American novel.
Well, and that's a good description.
Well, and then it goes on. It is a jungle of neologisms, solecisms, malapropisms, and other manglings.
Oh, I bet they got a lot of orders for that.
The plotting is execrable. The sentiments are risible. The diction is vile. It is, in short, a thoroughly entertaining hour's read.
Perfect description.
Isn't that beautiful?
A good description, and truthful too. And I bet they got a lot of orders.
Well, opinionated, is that another characteristic that you think is valuable?
Well, there are certain dealers, one of whom, Biblioctopus, he has lots of opinions in his catalogs, and I love it. I think they're so interesting. I've always stayed away from that kind of very personal description. That's not me, but I've written to him a number of times saying, I just love what you do, how you put yourself in your descriptions.
Is he still around?
Oh, yeah. We just got a catalog, a really nice opinionated catalog a couple days ago from him.
Okay, so you've mentioned one. Any other catalogs that you think are terrific?
Sure. One of my great heroes in science and medicine, which is another field I deal in, is Emil Offenbacher, who was a German Jewish emigre to New York. And he made a series of about 20 catalogs, all the same format, very brief descriptions, no illustrations. They're a triumph of modesty and knowledge. All he did was just say why the book was good and should be bought, and never more than that.
Okay. Catalogs from 200 or 300 years ago, the kind of catalogs that you sell, they'll typically go for thousands of dollars.
Some of them, yes.
Yeah, quite a lot of them.
Mm-hmm.
Catalogs from the past 100 years, $15 to $50. What's going on?
Well, there's still a lot of them around.
So rarity is the big thing?
Yeah, rarity and yes, it's rarity. People have a hard time getting these catalogs from the early days.
Because, I mean, these are beautiful works of art, and there's a ton of work that's gone into them, scholarship and thinking, and yet you can get them for $5.
Well, yeah, that's because on ABE, we've learned how common certain books are. It was a real eye opener to me that when ABE got going, just how many copies of books were available, and that's why we used to have a nice little business in out of print scholarly books that fit into science and medicine and bibliography. But then with ABE, there was always somebody who had a copy for less, and so you wanted to get out of that market. There's always someone working from his garage in Akron, Ohio, with a copy for less. So you don't want to compete against him because you can't. So you want to have the only copy on ABE or the best copy.
Yeah.
Because who wants to have the cheapest copy?
Unless it's in fine condition.
Well, yeah, sure.
So I assume that annotated catalogs are better, if it's of the time, are better than not annotated.
Well, yes, you get catalogs with buyer let's stick to book catalogs, booksellers catalogs. When you can get a copy of a bookseller's catalog that's got items marked with buyers' names, that's really interesting, because then you see where the books went. And also you get to learn about who were the buyers in 1820. That's really great stuff. Some of the names you know very well, and others you never heard of. And it's very teasing to try to find out who these people are.
I love the distinction. They used to be soiled, and now they're honest.
Well, we have had soiled books. We also have, all our books are honest, but we've also had some soiled honest books.
Okay, so I've just recently become really interested in bookseller catalogs. I figure there's some beautiful stuff, and they're cheap. Now, I happen to have a larger book collection that I'm, sort of reflecting the interviews that I conduct. So I've got publishers' histories and memoirs from all sorts of different types of people connected to the book. And I'm also now going after sales catalogs of publishers and ephemera from bookstores and that kind of stuff, just to show how they actually went about selling their books.
Right.
All of that said, if I'm a young guy that's listening to this, or a woman, what would you recommend? If they say, hey, this does sound like a really interesting field.
Booksellers have to collect what interests them, what turns them on, what they find fascinating. So they have to find their own direction. It's useless to tell them you should, for a bookseller to say, oh, you should collect this. I mean, the most we should do is just suggest this is an area of interest and see whether it catches on. I've done that a number of times with bibliography, and a number of times it did catch on, and people made deep, rich collections of this stuff.
Okay, that doesn't answer my question. I want your advice as an accomplished bookseller. I'm a young collector and I'm interested in bookseller catalogs. What should I do? I've already determined I'm really fascinated and I love them. So what should I do?
You should buy some and see which direction you're going to go in. I mean, I can't tell people what to do. Clients, I let them find their own way. That's the best way to do it. Book collectors have to find their own direction.
Okay, well, this is a terrific direction, and I really appreciate you providing some guidance and signposts and history. Is there anything else that you'd like to say about what you've done with your career specific to book catalogs?
Well, it's given me great pleasure to work in this field, and it's just been so interesting. I've learned so much. The clients are really nice who buy this stuff, and it's just been fun to work in. And it's a very rich, enormous area to play around in for both the dealer and the collector and the library. And I highly recommend it. And you can do it all different ways at all different price points. So you don't have to be loaded at all. You can do it on the cheap and do something important and interesting.
Well, thank you so much for giving me such pleasure in talking to you.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me.
I've been speaking to Johnathan Hill, who is the proprietor of Johnathan A. Hill Bookseller, specializing in, maybe you could tell me.
Well, science, medicine, natural history, Asian books, manuscripts, and scrolls, and the history of bibliography and book collecting.
Thanks again.
You're welcome. Thank you.